Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all in online lecture series for MA Semester 4, jointly organized by Rajkumar Kevalramani Kanya Mahavidyalaya Nagpur, Mahila Mahavidyalaya Nagpur, Vasantrao Naik, Government Institution Nagpur, and JM Patel College Bhandara. Today, in the evening session, we have among us Dr. Kanchan Joshi as a resource person. Madam is working as an assistant professor in English at Shri Niketan Arts and Commerce College, Nagpur. She has 14 years of teaching experience. A number of publications are to her credit. She is the coordinator of Internal Quality Assurance Cell of her college. Madam, on behalf of the host colleges, I welcome you and request you to conduct the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Madhavi, madam. At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers, Dr. Dabir madam, Dr. Bhagdikar madam, Singhal sir, Karthik Panikar sir, and a very big thank you to Madhavi madam that she has given me an opportunity to be a part of this online classes for MA. So, shall I start?
Sure, please.
Okay. I'll share the screen. Yes, let's begin. A very good afternoon to all the students. I'm going to deal with the unit number 4, that is 20th century poetry. The first part of this paper, which consists the background study, and the second part is the two predominant poets are there for the detailed study. So first, we will see the background study of this 20th century poetry. Okay, let's begin. First, the performance poetry. Performance poetry is a broad term encompassing a variety of styles and genres. Genres are the types. Okay, so performance, the very name of the performance poetry suggests that the poetry which is written for the performance. Okay, so it is a poetry that is specifically composed for the performance or during a performance before an audience. This term came into popular usage in 1980s to describe the poetry written or composed for performance rather than print distribution. Means this performance poetry is written for the sake of performance only rather than the print distribution. It was not written to get printed, and it is mostly open to improvisation. Okay. Performance poetry and the spoken word. Spoken word is also there. Performance poetry and spoken word generally means similar things these days, and it all goes back to the oral tradition, as performance poetry, which is meant to perform on the stage. So the poetry has been recited on the stage, so that it all goes back to the oral tradition. The term performance poetry originates from an early press release describing the 1980s performance poet Hedvig Goreski. So it is originated by the performance poet, that is Hedvig Goreski. She was born on July 18, 1949. She is an American performance poet and an avant-garde artist. What is avant-garde? Are the people or works that are experimental, radical with respect to art, culture, or society. So it is characterized by aesthetic innovation. So she has innovated this form, that is the poetry form, and she has started performing her poetry on the stage. Her audio recordings become very popular across the world. So people started listening her performances, and and she popularized this performance poetry across the world. Goreski was an art graduate, and tried to come up with a term that would distinguish her text-based vocal performances from performance art. So text-based vocal performances, she has written the poetry just for the vocal performances, not for the performance art. What is the performance art? The artwork which is created, the artwork created through action. It involves space, time, body, and presence of artist. So it was not for the performance art, but it was for the vocal performances. Her band, East of Eden Band, it was described as the most successful at music and poetry collaboration, as she has started this East of Eden Band, and it becomes very successful band at music. It was very popular in America. So performance poetry is different than just reading a poetry aloud, and that has been written for the printed page. It is different, which has been written for the printed page. So traditional poets many times use standard structures or like standard devices, but these contemporary performance poetry uses experimental rhythms to engage an audience or to give them ultimate listening experience. So her poetry was meant for audio distribution and only especially for the radio. So what makes it different from poetry in a book? Poets, it is performed on the stage. So poets' presence is there on the site of the performance. So importance of the site of the performance, the use of vernaculars, dialects, and accents. These performance poetry artists use the vernaculars, dialects, and accents. Usually speech that is marked by any of the three situates the poet within a particular community. So people, when they listen this poetry, they feels that this is our poetry or this is my poetry. So performance poem use elements that appeal to the oral and not exclusively to the visual. It includes music, rhythm, recordings, or imitations of non-verbal sounds, smells, and other perceptions of the senses. In the performance poetry, what is important? The volume, the pitch of your sound, and then expressions and movement as the artist performs on the stage. So it becomes very, very important, as it includes rhythm, music. The performance poetry checklist. When some artist starts performing on the stage, he should consider all these things. That is volume. He should be consider his volume. Then use of different voices. When you read the poetry, you have to use the modulation in your voices. You cannot just read the poem in a one tone. It will be very boring. So it is very, very important to use the modulations in your voices. Then body position, how you stand, how you are moving. So your gestures, these are very, very important. So when the performance poetry artist, they should be very, very careful about their body positions. Then expressions are very, very important. When the poet, if he is the writer, if he is the writer of the poetry, he can actually convey the emotions very powerfully, because he is the writer. But when you are reading somebody else's poetry, then you have to understand that poetry, you have to understand the idea behind it, and then you have to perform, and then you will get that expressions while performing on the stage. Then you have to take the pauses. It is very, very important while reading anything. So you have to be careful about the punctuatory marks. So you should take the pauses. Voice modulation is important. Then body posture is important. Gestures are important. Expressions are important. And pauses are very, very important when you perform or when you read any literary piece on the stage. So what makes good poetry? We can say that internalization of the poem rather than excessive gestures. If you go on making the gestures, then it will be very loud. So you should understand, absorb the idea, opinion, belief, and so that it becomes a part of you, and then perform. Then only you will be able to internalize that poem, and it will be the idea behind it will be conveyed powerfully to the audiences. Then appropriate interpretation is very, very important, as it enhances the audience understanding. Then poets can speak on any issues that are important to him or to you, or of a global importance, or any political issue. Then spoken word. I have already told that these days spoken word and performance poetry are similar, and it goes down to the oral tradition. So spoken word refers to an oral poetic performance art that is based mainly on the poem as well as the performer's aesthetic quality. So spoken word is an expressive and free, enabling performer to speak openly. It is the art of open expression, we can say that. It is intended for performance, though some spoken word poetry may also be published on the page. The genre has its roots in oral tradition and performance. Then in some ways, performance poetry, sometimes known as a spoken word, is connected to the oral traditions that date back to ancient times before the written word. We know that in ancient times, the literature, the mythological stories, they were passed down from generations to the next generations orally only. So in these cases, the poetry or story was passed down oral to each generation, and they then added their own twists and styles of performance into the story, so that each performance was unique. Here, when they were passed down orally to each generation, that generation, they add their own twist and styles of performance, and they present it on the stage. Spoken word contain elements of rap, hip hop, storytelling, theater, and jazz, rock, blues, and folk music. So unlike written poetry, it depends more on phonoaesthetics, or the aesthetic of sound, rather than visual aesthetics. So unlike written poetry, it depends more on phonoaesthetics. Phonoaesthetics is the study of beauty and you can say pleasantness associated with the sounds of certain words, or a part of words, we can say that. So it depends, unlike written poetry, it depends on the aesthetic beauty, okay, rather than visual aesthetics. Roots of spoken word poetry. Spoken word emerged from jazz poetry of 1920s. So it emerged from jazz poetry of 1920s, and some American spoken word poetry originated from the poetry of Harlem Renaissance. Blues and the Beat Generation of 1960s. Harlem Renaissance is an intellectual and cultural revival of African American music. Blues and Beat Generation of 1960s, it is a literary movement started by some group of authors which influenced American culture. So this American spoken word poetry originated from these people, the poetry of the Harlem Renaissance and blues and the Beat Generation of 1960s. The civil rights movement also influenced spoken word. It comes out of young people, activists and artists, as it comes out of the young poets or the group of poets, you can say the group of authors, and the activists and stage artists also worked on the spoken word poetry. Spoken word poetry is often performed in a competitive setting. So it is very, very important that spoken word competitions were held and were labeled poetry slams. Again, nowadays it is, if you can search on a Google, you will find that poetry slams are there. The competition called poetry slams, that is spoken word competitions only. So spoken word poetry is often performed in a competitive setting. In 1990, the first National Poetry Slam was held in San Francisco. So, American poet Mark Smith started this poetry slam in 1984. In 1984, the first poetry slam was started by Mark Smith, and that started poetry slam in 1984. This art form is often used to convey important or controversial messages to the society. It relies on this spoken word poetry relies on heavy use of rhythm, improvisation, rhymes, and wordplay as it has been performed on the stage. Importance of performance poetry and spoken word. Why it has become popular? What is the importance of this performance poetry? So the chief purpose of this poetry is for the entertainment. Then performance poetry is also being used as a means to promote literacy in public schools system. In the schools also, teachers ask the students to recite the poetry by going on the stage. So this performance poetry is also being used as a means to promote literacy in public school systems. Performance poetry provides avenues for students to perform their poems on stage. The budding poets, for the budding poets, performance poetry is a chance by which they can perform their poetry on the stage. There is a positive impact on the mental well-being of performers. If the poet can perform his poetry on the stage, he gets utter satisfaction because he gets the audience. So it is a positive impact on the mental well-being of the performers. So because he feels that somebody is there to listen my poetry. Performance poetry or spoken word has new inspiring ways to engaging with people from all walks of life across a range of sectors. So performance poetry can be written on any subject, and the performance poetry artist can perform anywhere. So they can engage with the people, ways to engage the peoples from all walks of life. It relieves stress. When you listen to the poetry, it relieves the stress, it boosts the confidence and deal with variety of mental problems. It is stress buster, you can say that. It raises children's self-expression and communication skills. So it raises children's self-expression. Children can express their ideas, opinions through recitation of their poetry, and it increases the communication, it raises the communication skills. Then audio recordings have made it more accessible to a larger number of people. It fosters a culture of active listening. When you listen to anything, if you listen to the performance of the performance poetry artist, you are means you are engaged there. That is an active listening, because you are very, very carefully listening to that performance. So it fosters a culture of active listening. Now the next topic of the background study is urban poetry. Urban poetry is a literary art form in which poetry is used to express feelings or to share experiences that are related to living in urban communities. The very name of the topic, that is urban poetry. So we can understand that the poetry which is written about the people who are residing in the urban areas or living in the urban communities. So urban poetry is a literary art form in which poetry is used to express feeling and share feelings or emotions and share the experiences of the urban communities. These poems are not set to music, although music might be played in the background during the live performances. We are talking about the live performances. Okay, so right from the performance poetry, spoken word. So these poems are not set to music, although music might be played in the background during a live performance or reading of a urban poetry. What are the common themes? Common themes include poverty, social injustice, stress, struggles, and survival. So it is believed that urban poetry is more appropriate as a spoken art form than a literature. Modern urban poets tend to focus on issues that negatively influence the lives of minorities. So, although many people consider the term urban refers to modern cities full of bricks, industries, cement, steel structures, flashing lights, and hundreds of thousands of people. Although cities have become more modernized nowadays, but many of the conditions that inspire urban poetry are same as they were before. So long before, we can see that some poets have written about the frustration of the city life and the excitement, and which have inspired the poets of 18th century also. So they have also written the urban poetry. We can see the urban poetry in the 18th century also, but they have written about the frustration of the city and the city life and the excitement of the city life. So we can find that in the 18th century. The theme of the urban life reoccurs in the works of poets throughout the 20th century, but the concern of urban living has long preoccupied the poets. So we have seen the urban poets in 18th century also. We can treatment of the theme of the urban life. In the pre-industrial age, the town was the administrative base of the provinces, so the city was a cultural phenomena. So in the pre-industrial age, city was an ideal thing to write down upon. So the poetry of the 19th century represented the city as an ideal thing, as the ancestor and defender of the civilization in the tradition of ancient Rome. Robert Breaches, the Victorian poet, expressed the idealistic view of cities and urban life. The most vociferous critic of industrialization and the exploitation of common humanity was William Blake. So many poets have written about the urban communities, their tensions, frustrations, and the beauty of the urban life as well. Okay. So one overriding theme of the urban poetry is the condemnation of social injustice, which is a very predominant theme of the urban poetry, as it negatively influences the lives of the minorities. Urban poetry includes innocent victim of violent crime. Although urban poetry might be fictional, it addresses situation that poem has personally experienced. So the poets have written their own experiences, and during the live performance, unjust situations or unjust experience can be experienced by both the poet and the audience. So nowadays the live performances are common. Open mic nights or open mic nights are there, if you find on the Google, during which experienced as well as the new urban poets are invited to share their art, or they are invited to recite their poetry on the platform. Then Poetry Archive. The Poetry Archive is a free web-based library formed to hold recordings of English language poets reading their own work. So Poetry Archive is a free web-based library. So if you go on these sites like Poetry Archive, you get a number of poetry. So the Poetry Archive, it is a free web-based library form to hold recordings of English language poets. It holds the recording of English language poets. They read their own work. They read their own poetry. The archive holds over 20,000 poems and keep the recordings safe and accessible so that current and future visitors can enjoy them. So you can go anytime to, if you want to listen to any poetry by any author, you can go on this Poetry Archive, which is a web-based, free web-based library, and you can find it out and you can listen to that art form. It preserved uniquely valuable voices which might otherwise be lost. The old poets, we cannot listen their poetry in their own voice. But now, because of this Poetry Archive, we can listen the work or the art form of the poets in their from their own, or from his own voice. Okay. So the poets have unique relationship with their own, like why this is Poetry Archive? The poets have unique relationship with their own work and are often able to communicate the nuances, or you can say musicality of it, with deeper understanding than actors. Many times actors perform the perform on the stage, but it is not his own work. He is just performing. But when it comes to the poet himself who has written that poetry, it becomes more powerful. Why? Because he has the unique relationship with their own work, and they are often able to communicate those feelings strongly with the audiences, with the deeper understanding with the audiences. The Poetry Archive was founded by recording producer Reacher Carrington. Producer is Reacher Carrington and poet Andrew Motion during his appointment as UK Poet Laureate in 1999. Recording of contemporary work began in 2000 and the first website went live in 2005. So Andrew Motion is an English poet, novelist and biographer, you can say, and poet laureate from 1999 to 2009. He founded Poetry Archive, an online resource of poems and audio recordings of poets reading their own work. The Poetry Archive is not for-profit registered UK charity. Most of the recordings are created especially for the archive, and these are augmented by some classic poems read by well-known readers. The classic poems, they have stored the classic poetry also, but which was read by some other well-known readers. So in the first year, the site had 5 lakh visitors, building to over 1.5 million annual users in 2008, nearly 2 million in 2009, and over 3 million currently in its 20th year of recording. So the Poetry Archive also features a children poetry archive. So if you go on to this Poetry Archive, you can find the children's poetry as well. In 2012, Andrew Motion became president of this campaign to protect rural England. Hearing a poet read his or her own work remains uniquely illuminating, and it helps us to better understand and enjoy his work. When poet dies without making a recording, a precious resource is lost. If some poet, he does not make any recording of his poetry, the resource is lost. A precious resource is lost forever. So Poetry Archive is very, very important, just to preserve the poetry of the poets, or the art form, you can say. The Great Recession. The global financial crisis of 2007, which took place in the United States, has cast its long shadow on the economic fortunes of many countries, resulting in what has often been called the Great Recession. The global financial crisis, which took place in 2007-2008, which results in the great economic crisis, fortunes of many countries, it affected globally, and resulting in what often called as the Great Recession across the globe. What are the effects of this Great Recession? The official poverty rate increased. Due to this Great Recession, the official poverty rate increased that time, and one of the most visible effect of the recession was job losses and unemployment. Due to the recession, many people had lost their jobs. They became unemployed. It increased because of the unemployment. It has increased stress, poorer health outcomes, because it affects on the health, mental health, as well as the physical health. Delays in age of marriage. The people are not settled. Young people were not settled. They did not get the job because of the recession. So delays in age of marriage and changes in household structure. It was associated with health outcomes such as increased risk of heart attack and stroke, increased chance of diabetes, as it affected the physical health as well. So it has increased the chances of diabetes, arthritis, psychological problems, you can say, greater depression, anxiety, and loss of sleep. The inflow of economic migrant to the US across the globe declined sharply in the recession period. So because of the recession, economic migrants, the inflow of economic migrants to the US, it has also declined. It has also decreased. Okay. Subprime mortgages are home loans which were granted to borrowers with the poor credit history, and their loans were high risk loan, and because of that, many of them had to sell their houses, sell their homes. So Great Recession, in this, at the time of the Great Recession, literature was also created. Works of fiction, you can say, poetry, film, reflect and refract and respond to the recessionary time specific and global recession in 21st century. Poets have the gift to show their viewpoint, and that we might not see. So they portrayed positive side as well as the negative side in their literary works. So they presented blunt realities of life, like tensions, then frustrations of the recession. But at the same time, some poets have found or pointed the silver lining in the cloud, which gave us hope. For example, like Duckling Thrush, Everything Changes at the time of World War. Also, the poetry has given us the hope. The same way, at the time, the poetry which was written at the time of Great Recession, it gave hope. Some poetry have just portrayed the realities, the facts of the life, and some poets have given or have written the optimistic poetry, you can say. The next topic is found poetry. The found poem achieved prominence in the 20th century. Found poems take existing texts and refashion them, reorder them, and present them as poems in this way. So found poetry is the literary equivalent version of collage. It is like a literary equivalent version of collage. It is somewhat an umbrella term, we can say, encompassing any poetry made up of text from pre-existing sources. We can take the some sentences, or you can say the words from existing text or existing sources, and we can refashion them, reorder them, reorganize them, and we can make our own work of art. So found poetry is the literary equivalent version of collage. These poems are created by making changes in spacing and lines, or by adding or deleting text, thus imparting new meaning. So in some poems, they make some changes here and there, like just spacing and lines, or they in some found poetry, they just add or delete the text also. Found poetry was popularized by poets such as Borrow and Brian Gysin in the mid-20th century. In the 1916s, the Tom Phillips began his monumental work, Humament. Other artists and poets adopted found poetry techniques into their work through the next several decades. So found poetry can consist of any material in which the poet finds some sort of literary merit. Whatever you find which has some literary merit, you can take that material to create your poetry. There are many methods of writing found poetry. Ultimately, it is up to the poet to decide how to turn their source text into the something new. So poet generally alters the source text, changing its order or changing its syntax, or he simply add lines or breaks and new spacings to turn the text into a new poem. What can you use for source text? From where you can take, what is the source to make the found poetry? You can take from news, you can use the newspapers and magazines, you can take it. Then product packaging, there are so many things written on this product packaging. So if they are appealing, so there are so many taglines, so you can take that. Then menus, obituaries, junk mails are there, so you can use those words in the junk mails, and you can be creative. Recipe cards, then graffiti, sheet music, diary entries, cookbooks, appliance instructions, court transcript. So you can take your source from all these things, and you can make your own poetry. You can create your own poetry. Now, for the detailed study, we have got two predominant contemporary poets, that is Andrew Motion. We have seen the Andrew Motion, who has started the Poetry Archive. And now he is there for the detailed study. We are going to study his poems as well. So Andrew Peter Motion, he was born on October 26th, 1952 in London. He is a British poet. He is a biographer and a novelist who was especially noted for his narrative poetry. He served as a poet laureate of England. He was a poet of the nation. He served as a poet laureate of England from 1999 to 2009. He attended Radley College and University College, Oxford. He has done BA and MLit, and he taught at the University of Hull from the year 1976 to 1980. He was the editor of Poetry Review from 1980 to 1983. He subsequently taught at the University of London and at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. He is a recipient of Newdigate Prize in 1975, Somerset Maugham Award for the Lamberts, George, Constant and Kit in 1987, and he has received Dylan Thomas Prize for Natural Causes in 1987. He worked in a variety of editorial capacities for two London publishing houses as well. He received this Newdigate Prize for his poem that is called Inland, which describes the fear and helplessness of 17th century villagers. He received I have already read this, the Somerset Maugham Award for his biography of talented Lambert family. And he has frequently he has written the critical works on Edward Thomas and Philip Larkin. And he has written the biography of Philip Larkin, the poet. He has also produced the biography of the poet John Keats. And he tried to make a poetry accessible to wider audience, and he especially targeted the young people. So he is a high profile champion of poetry. He is a founder of Poetry Archive, and he was the first laureate to serve a fixed 10-year time. You can say a 10-year term. And Motion was knighted in 2009. Knighthood is a little title given to a man by a British king or queen for his achievements or for his service. So he has frequently wrote about the loss and isolation as well as the old age. The first poem, which is prescribed by Andrew Motion, is Regime Change in 1999. So in 2003, Motion wrote Regime Change, which is a poem. It is a poem in protest at the invasion of Iraq. The point of, as I have written, it is an anti-war poem. In the interview of his with the BBC, he told that he has written the anti-war poem, that is Regime Change in 99. It is about the war or fight in Iraq. He opposes the US-led strike on Iraq. in protest at the invasion of Iraq, the point of view, he describes the point of view of death walking the streets during the conflict. Death is personified over here. Death is walking the streets during the conflict, and death is showing. It is a 22-line poem by Andrew Motion, which is largely cast as a speech by death. It is a speech by death, and death refers to sites such as Nineveh, Tigris, and Euphrates rivers, and says, "Now listen here. You see the names of places round about. They are mine now," because death is everywhere. Death has taken over these places, Nineveh, Tigris, Euphrates rivers, and so death is telling that they are mine now, and I have turned them inside. I have turned them inside out. So the beautiful places like Eden, Babylon, and Baghdad, which are associated with cultural achievements, but due to war, its beauty diminishes. Its famous structures, you can say the artifacts, huge walls and gates, gorgeous fruits have lost its grandeur because of the war. Death moves through Iraq and destroying historical sites, leaving them devastated. Now, all these historic cities are suffering highly. It ends by saying, "Death is now working on the star-tipped minarets, the marble courts, and halls of Baghdad." Poet says there is an absolutely appalling situation. The poem concludes at Baghdad with death saying, "These places, the ancient things you won't know soon. I am working on it." So death is working on it. So it is about historic places in Iraq whose past glories have become eclipsed by war and death. So this regime change, which is about it is a war poem, it is an anti-war poem, and it is about the destruction, suffering of the people, cultural destruction, and it leaves Iraq in a devastated, you can say. It ruined all the beautiful things in Iraq. The next poem, which is written by Andrew Motion, is Spring Wedding. You can see the picture. This poem was written by Andrew Motion in 2005. It celebrates the marriage of Prince Charles and who is the Prince of Wales, and Camilla Parker Bowles. So the poem has 16 lines broken up into 4 quatrains for the marriage of the heir to the throne and his long time companion entitled. Long time companion is Camilla Parker Bowles. So it is a spring wedding, and this duty is given to Andrew Motion. It has been told to him that to write the poem on this wedding. So he has written the spring wedding. So it describes the marriage as a piece of news. He says that it is a news I am disclosing, I'm conveying this news, I'm bringing it in front of the gates, that while he talks of the he is bringing that piece of news that Prince Charles and Prince of Wales and Camilla are getting married. So while he talks of this, while he talks about the spring wedding, he talks about the scandal fly will whirring round. They had a very troubled history, the Prince of Wales and Camilla, and they experience ups and downs in their relationships. So the troubled history of the pair's relationship is also dealt with in this poem. This relationship has, as all the world knows, had all kinds of difficulties. And this relationship had many ups and downs, and it had all kinds of difficulties, trials, and tribulations to deal with. So he said now he said that the relationship was now running its proper course. As they are getting married, he says that now it's okay. Now it is running its proper course, and he had used the image of stream to convey the difficulties the couple had faced. So stream, he had used the image of the stream, that the stream has to flow from every surface which is difficult, which is smooth. So they have experienced many troubles in their relationships, and they overcome those troubles, and they got ultimately married. So that poem Spring Wedding, which is written in 2005 by Andrew Motion on the occasion of the wedding of the prince and Camilla. The next poem, that is A Better Life. Better Life, which is written again by the Andrew Motion. It is a found poem. We have already discussed what is a found poem. It is a type of, it is a found poem. Motion's found poem is inspired by the stories and images of older people. He talks about the old age in this poem. So A Better Life, it describes the images of older people and the stories of the old age. He talks about the old age in this poem. The speakers in this poem are narrating their experiences and reminiscences of their boyhood and young age. There are many speakers. In this poem we can find many speakers in this poem, and they are just telling their or narrating their experiences. So it is A Better Life is about the old age. It is about the good old memories, about the childhood memories. They remember their honeymoon trip, their young age, and now they're waiting. Some of them are waiting for the death, or some of them wants to live and enjoy life. So the speakers in this poem, there are many speakers in this poem. They are narrating their experiences, reminiscences of their boyhood and young age. They talk about the aloneness, or you can say solitude, of the old age. Peter was married to Steve for 57 years now, but he is alone and now distressed at the thought that nobody is there uh, uh, who would miss him after his death. So he is very much distressed. Simon, aged 67, Liz, aged 82, Helen, 72, keep themselves fit and busy. They remember their courageous happening life, but in this old illness, in this old age, the illness is there. So they count because of that illness, loneliness, solitude. They feel distress, but at that time they count the blessings of God. And one of them says that I want to die, while someone says, as for me, I have not done. Some of them says, I have not done yet. It's not time for me to go. I'm still the child that loves to arrive by night in a new place, then wakes early to pull the curtains back on sunlight pouring into bay. So the poet wants to say old age is ultimate reality of life, and we should accept it with positive perspective. The next poet which is prescribed in your book is Jackie Kay. For the detailed study, Jackie Kay and Andrew Motion, both the poets are there for the detailed study. So Jackie Kay, that is, her name is Jacqueline Margaret Kay, who was born on 9th November 1961. So she is a Scottish poet, playwright, and novelist. Jackie Kay was born in Edinburgh, Scotland, to a Scottish mother and Nigerian father. She had a she was born to Scottish mother and Nigerian father. Later on, she was adopted by a white couple at birth and was brought up in Glasgow. She studied at Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama and studied English at the University of Stirling. She is known for her best works like Other Lovers. In 1993, she has written Other Lovers. She is very well known for The Trumpet. In 1998, it is written, and Red Dust Road in 2011. So she is known for all these three works. So she is a Scottish writer, novelist, playwright, born to the Scottish mother and Nigerian father. Her first book of poetry, the partially autobiographical, The Adoption Papers, was published in 1991 and won the Saltire Society's Scottish First Book Award and a Scottish Arts Council Book Award in 1992. She has also published several collections of short stories, as Jackie Kay lives in She has also published several collections of short stories. She is a Guardian Fiction. She has received Guardian Fiction Prize in 1998. Then the Scottish Mortgage Investment Trust Book of the Year Award in 2011. She has written the literature for children also, novel for children that is called Straw Girl, which was written in 2002. Then her collection of poetry for children, that is Red Cherry Red, which was written in 2007, and which has won CLPE Poetry Award in 2008. She was Scots Maker, means she is the National Poet Laureate of Scotland. She was appointed National Poet Laureate, that is known as Scots Maker, in the year 2016, and she was appointed as a Chancellor of the University of Salford in 2015. So now Jackie lives in Manchester and is a professor of creative writing at Newcastle University. She has written about she has written about the identity, quest for identity, and she was interested in how fluid identity can be. Fluid identity, the identity which goes on changing. Okay, that is called the fluid identity. So can be how people can reinvent themselves. The quest for identity which leads to the reinvention of themselves. So people reinvent themselves. How she has written about the gender and race. Race are the considered as the groups that we try to fix. That is in order to perhaps to cherish our own prejudices. Because of our own prejudices, we try to fix fix these groups. Okay. Then she says, I still have Scottish people asking me where I am from. They won't actually hear my voice because they are too busy seeing my face. As I have told you that she was born to Scottish mother and Nigerian father. She is a woman with the Igbo nose and the Scottish tongue. Her accent is Scottish, but still people try to judge her by looking at her face. So Jackie Kay is one who straddles twin identities of Scottish by birth and African by physicality. So Kay has drawn on her unconventional upbringing in her poetry. She has unconventional upbringing. Later on, she has been adopted by the Scottish couple. So she has a Scottish tongue, but still people they do not accept her as being a Scottish person. So describe she has all these things she has described in her art form with humor and great affection in her autobiographical account of the search for her birth parents in the Red Dust Road. So the predominant themes of her poetry are, you can say, the identity, quest for identity, fluid identity. So she has a great ability to articulate a wide range of emotional experiences which are rooted in everyday life and a keen sense of socio-political realities. She has described in her poetry the socio-political realities. Her writing reflects the cruel realities of racism, then misogyny, that is a dislike or contempt, you can say, for or ingrained prejudice for against the women, and homophobia, that is irrational fear of aversion or discrimination against homosexuality and transgender. Yes, but she has a deep faith in the transformative powers of human love, and that can be traced in some of her poetries. The first poem which is prescribed, the first poem of her which is prescribed in MA, that is the No Longer Dead. It is one of the most moving poem from her collection called Fear. Fear is a collection of 44 poems, and it explores the importance of others in our lives. It is a kind and compassionate collection, and it is gently optimistic also. It moves with familiar and familial ease between continents, between dialects, and between generations. So this poem suggests the importance of people in our lives, in our childhood, mischiefs, in understanding the parenthood. In our childhood, we need people. So the No Longer Dead, in the No Longer Dead, she imagines those who were so cold in their skin. Now, the one who is dead, returning, congregating, speaking happily, and how strange and pleased you are to find them coming too. You feel very pleased when you find them find them in your life. No longer gone. Kay extends this to the image of her son listening to her favorite singers when she has died. She feels very happy that after my death also her son remembers, he needs me. And she finds it very, very comforting that her son listening to her favorite singers. So she is at ease with death as she is with life. Although Kay writes about coming to terms with age and with those she has loved, there is hardly a moment of regret. She accepts life as it comes to her. The next poem is George Square. This poem was reproduced on a postcard for a National Poetry Day in 2009. George, again, this poem is about the old age. It is about the companionship. It is about the, you can say, the political upheaval. It shows the responsible citizen. Then it speaks about the importance of peace as well. Okay, so her poem George Square conveys the quiet affection of old age couple. It begins with the affection of the old age couple for each other and how they help each other in that old age. So the poem's George Square conveys the quiet affection of the old age couple, the care for each other, emotional companionship at the age of 77. So Jackie K describes loving father who puts on, you can say, specs to help his wife to button her dress. She calls him to button her dress, although his eyesight has become weak. But uh, being old, his wife cannot button her dress because she has a sore wrist. So she has a problem in her wrist, so she is unable to button her dress, so she calls her husband. So it is the affection between the couple is described. They have their own old age problems, health issues, but they are still aware of the need of peace across the globe. They are the responsible citizen. They are very much aware about the political upheaval going on in the world. So there is a hint of the politics. There is a hint of the politics at the heart of this relationship, and they are getting ready to go to the George Square. The one is with the sore wrist, and the one is with the arthritis, to march against the war in Iraq. They are going to the George Square just to march against the war, to protest against that war in Iraq. And they participated in that. They have already participated in many marches over their years for the sake of peace and for the sake of kindness. So their companionship, their companionship, the care for each other, the emotional companionship at the age of 77, it has been described by the K, but at the same time, there is a hint of the politics at the heart of these relationships. And though they are old, they are very much aware what is going on in the world, and they participate in all the marches and movement to show the protest. And this is all about the George Square. The next poem is Here Is My Pitch. Here is my pitch. This poem was chosen as a part of National Poetry Day in 2018 for the theme of change. The theme of the National Poetry Day was change, and this poem was chosen for that. It is about the Arthur Wharton, who was the world's first Black professional footballer player. Poet asks Arthur Wharton to come back to play his finest game. So Arthur Wharton was the world's first Black professional footballer to play in Britain. Okay. Poet wishes Arthur Wharton, he's dead. Poet wishes Arthur Wharton to come back from the dead, to see the man in black blow the final whistle. She wants him to come back to blow the final whistle. His game was very, but he was denied the opportunities. So because of his color, that is black, he could play on the wing, but would rather guard a net. He was a great, you can say, goalkeeper. He was denied the opportunities due to his color. She's talking about the racism. So the poet calls him back to show his talent and strength. Poet asks him to be free from all assaults, from all insults, all the thoughts. And she says, every uttered thought, every chant and rant, every strip and stripe, you should be free from it. And she says, the presiding spirit. She calls him the presiding spirit of the black man, and she calls him to end the game. This is our pitch. She says, it is now our pitch, and now hear us roar. You can win this game. So she is calling him back on the stage to win the game. This is about, here is my page. Then the poem, the last poem, that is Black Bottom. This is about the key theme of the poem is black identity. There is a significant shift from that of the purest identity to mixed racial identity. Many times we talk about the only identity, but now here is the mixed racial identity. Being a daughter of a Scottish mother and Nigerian father, she has written about this mixed racial identity, and identity is the key theme in many of her poems. So she records people's wrong assumptions and racist stereotypes, you can say. The poem is about a search for a permanent and reliable identity. So according, you can say, what is identity then? According to the Oxford Dictionary, identity is the characteristics determining who or what a person or thing is. So we can say that the distinguishing character or personality of an individual is an identity. So she was born to Afro-Scottish parents and then later on adopted by the Scottish couple. So again, her parents were the Scottish people. So she was later adopted by revolutionary Scottish couple. She has experienced in her childhood or in her young age as well, she has experienced several episodes of racism. She faced racial assaults at the hands of different people during the various stages of life. So stereotype is a typecast. What do you mean by stereotype? Stereotype is a typecast, and stereotype and racism are evident in this masterpiece, that is a Black Bottom. Black Bottom is a masterpiece. So racism expands its scope from being a mere societal evil to now racism has become the global phenomena. So it expands its scope from being a mere societal evil. Previously it was a societal evil, but now it has become a global phenomena, and this ignites a passionate thirst in the poet. Poet persona. Poet persona means the one who is speaking, the one who is a speaker in the poem. So the poet persona to find a permanent racial identity in an increasingly unfamiliar world, marking her transition from identity to foreclosure to identity moratorium. I'll explain. So this societal evil, that is the racism, ignites a passionate thirst in the speaker, and he tries to find the permanent racial identity in an increasingly unfamiliar world. So she is trying to making her transition from identity foreclosure. Identity foreclosure is, it is a psychological term that describes one of the key steps young people experiences in the process of finding sense of self. Means the young people who faces the racism, and at the same time that person tries to find his own identity. It is a process of finding sense of self. At this stage, these people may adopt different traits from, you can say, friends, relatives, but they are not settled down any of their own. So they are in the process. So she is marking that her transition from identity foreclosure to identity moratorium. Moratorium is one step in the process of finding a sense of self. So in the poem, in this poem, she conjures up the vivid images and mindsets, and she also depicts the mindsets of three different individuals whose narrative voices jointly constitute the poem. That is, one is the birth mother, the adoptive mother, and the adopted daughter, all of whom are preoccupied with speaker's sense of identity. So this is all. I think whatever I explained, it will help you to write down in your paper, and I try to do maximum justice with the topic. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your wonderful presentation. Hope the students have understood both the poets and the prescribed poems along with the background topics. On behalf of the host institutions, organizing committee, I would like to express humble thankfulness to you, ma'am, for your wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you to all the participants also. We will meet tomorrow again with the new topic and with the new resource person. Thank you so much.